Jacksonian democracy. We picked up, or we left off with the Webster-Hayne debate will be the next big controversy that will further divide the North and the South. The issue all got started in 1829 when a New England senator introduced a bill to curb public land, the sale of public land in the West. The motivation behind that is the New England area, which is the industrial area, believed that too many people would be headed to the West and would siphon off the workers, and they wouldn't have enough workers to work in the textile mills and other things that are going on in the North. So this is how this argument started. The Westerners were upset with the fact that this bill had been introduced, and the Southern senators sided with the West. As this debate goes on, it spills over into the tariff. Robert Hayne, South Carolina, will believe that he has an axe to grind with the North. And Daniel Webster, of course, from Maine, will speak for their side. He believes that the North is selfish and that they impose this terrible tariff on them, and he's not sure that they're really all that patriotic. They didn't show it during the War of 1812. So they're going to have a heated debate, and both sides are going to say that they won the debate. So the stage is set for a showdown in the Senate. Now, Robert Hayne was a states' rights kind of fella, as was Jackson. And so he's going to come from that argument that the states have some right to protect themselves from the federal government. And that also that they have the right to nullify certain acts if they believe that they are hurtful for one part of the country, which the South felt that way about the tariff. So he condemns the selfishness of the protective tariff that's only good for the northern industries so that they can sell their goods and raise the price on goods coming from Europe. He blasted the tariff abomination, said it was a terrible thing, and he proclaimed that the Calhoun Doctrine on Relocation was alive and well. The Southerners will use this nullification argument later as a justification for the Civil War. So both sides are set for a fight. Daniel Webster from New England speaks on behalf of the tariff and says it's a good thing. And he also says, you know, the Union is the most important thing that we should be looking at here, not at sectional differences. We need to preserve the Union. He does not believe in this compact theory, that is the states creating the Constitution. He believed that the Constitution was created by the people and that states do not have the right to nullify federal law. Article 6 of the Constitution said so. His argument is liberty now and forever, one and inseparable. Nice quote. Each side believes they have won the debate, as most politicians do. This was a position or some of the things that were said at the time. Calhoun, Jackson, and Webster all claiming that the Union was the most important things. The result of the debate is that it further divides the North and the South. There seems like there's a lot of issues from this point on over the next 28 years or so that is just going to keep driving a wedge between the North and the South and eventually leading to the Civil War. Jackson, although he sides with what Haynes has to say, because he's a states' rights kind of a guy, he believes that the most important thing that he can do is to preserve the Union at whatever cost that would be. They were hoping, the people on the states' rights side was hoping that Jackson would side with them, but they miscalculated. Calhoun miscalculated Jackson's intent, and Jackson will come squarely against those folks who want to nullify the tariff. Now, the nullification controversy comes in 1832 because Calhoun is going to resign as the vice president and go back to South Carolina and be elected by the state legislature as their senator to go back to Washington. He urges them to frame a law that nullifies this tariff of abomination. So the whole nullification argument comes to the forefront. The tariff of 1832 was an attempt to soften the tariff of 1828. It lowered it 10%. But this wasn't good enough for the Southerners. They wanted a greater reduction. And so South Carolina just said, well, we'll just nullify this tariff because we don't believe in it. And they made preparations, military preparations, to defend themselves. And they threatened to secede from the Union if Jackson attempted to force them to collect the tariff. So the tariff of abomination, 1828, this is sort of the timeline. A new tariff that was less, but South Carolina still rejected that. Jackson's response, well, protect the Union at whatever cost. Clay is eventually going to come up with a compromise that will avert military action and possible secession. He is also known as a great compromiser because he will find some ways to keep the Union together by making compromises that suit the North and the South. Jackson privately said that he would hang Calhoun to the nearest tree and all the people who were threatening to nullify this tariff. He dispatched the Navy and the military to South Carolina and to put down the rebellion, or possible rebellion. Cried out against nullification, said it was illegal. Looked like a possible civil war was in the making. Of course, Henry Clay is going to come up with a compromise bill that said that it will lower the tariff 10% over the next 8 years. Eventually, South Carolina buys this, and they will rescind their legislation about nullifying the tariff. So this tariff bill gets squeezed through, but at the same time, Congress passes a force bill which says that they have a right to impose whatever tariff they want, and the president can use military action to collect that tariff. Now, South Carolina doesn't like this because they dubbed this bill, the force bill, as a bloody bill because they say, well, if we don't go along with that, you're liable to kill us. And if Jackson had had his way, that might have happened. Now, as in most politics, both sides claim victory. The South Carolina group said, well, we got a lower tariff. And other folks on the other side, including Jackson, said, well, we averted a civil war. And gradually the crisis comes to an end. Now, the election of 1832 is significant because Henry Clay, a longtime enemy of Jackson, will run the National Republican versus Jackson, the Democratic Republican. Still the same party. We don't have a two-party. This is just a division within the Democratic Party. Jackson favored a one-term presidency, but all of his supporters said, hey, listen, you need to run again. And so because of their urging, he will, and he will be elected in 1832. Now, Henry Clay ran on the American system. He wanted a tariff to protect American industry. He wanted roads and canals built to improve transportation in America, and he wanted a strong banking system. Most of the newspapers supported Clay and criticized Jackson. There was a new group of people introduced, a third party, the anti-Masonic Party. They were against the Masonic Party. They said it was a secret organization. They manipulated politicians and elections. They were really for the rich and famous, and everything they did was secret. And they want more of a say in the government. They did believe in a laissez-faire attitude about business, but they certainly wanted it to be open and free, and they believed that the Masonic Order was an elitist group, and they were very suspicious of them. So the anti-Masonic Party will favor the Jacksonian politics because Jacksonians seem to be against the rich and the famous. This is a symbol of the Masons. This repeated charge of secrecy and conspiracy is going to be mentioned over and over again in American history. There were some prominent people who were part of the Masonic Lodge, including George Washington. Now, whether their claims were true or not, I am not sure. But they did believe, as did the Jacksonian Democrats, that you pretty much needed to keep your hands off business, let them do as they will. They did believe in a limited role of the federal government and gave states give them more power to promote equality and opportunity. Jackson hates the Bank of the United States and will do everything in his power to get rid of it, and he will succeed. So he will, when it comes up for renewal in 1836, he will exercise his veto and the bank will be killed. Before that leads up to it, there is certainly a controversy over the bank. Jackson says it's unconstitutional. But in the McCulloch versus Maryland, the Supreme Court said it was constitutional, said it was a legitimate entity in the federal government. Maryland had no right to tax the bank because if they had the right to tax the federal bank, they could destroy it, and it was constitutional. So the court says it's constitutional, but Jackson says no. And he'll do everything in his power to stop it. Nicholas Biddle was the guy who was in charge of the Bank of the United States. He seemed to favor the rich and powerful. He was a Hamiltonian, and he wants the people at the top to get it, and of course things will trickle down from there. And so Biddle and Jackson are going to have a face-off, and Jackson is going to prevail because he's going to veto this bank. But before that happens, there's going to be some things that happen that sour the milk. It shows a picture of Nicholas Biddle and Jackson. Now, the folks that were state bankers felt that they wanted soft money, they wanted paper money out there, they wanted banks to loan money so that the economy could grow. More speculation. The hard species people who seemed to be in favor of the position of the Bank of the United States, they wanted all money to be backed by silver and gold. They wanted conservative banking. They weren't all that interested in speculative kinds of things. They wanted to keep America on a sound financial footing and conservative banking. The pet banks is a scheme that Jackson comes up with. He's going to start moving deposits from the National Bank to these 23 state banks scattered throughout the United States. Now the charter will expire in 36 and it will be vetoed, and eventually the banking system in the United States, because of this destruction of the bank, many banks will go bankrupt, and America, in the panic of 1837, will experience certainly a downfall, all brought on by what Jackson calls a monster, but in fact we probably should have kept that bank. And we'll stop right there.